A member of Nigeria's House of Representatives, Abdulsammad Dasuki, has raised red flags over what he calls unauthorized alterations to the newly passed tax laws. According to him, the gazetted version, the one now in public circulation, is not what lawmakers voted on. He says that he compared the gazetted copy with the harmonized version passed by both chambers and found notable discrepancies, calling it a breach of legislative privilege and a constitutional violation. Let's take a look. All right, we'll bring the video to you much later, where he, of course, expressed this on the floor of the House. But joining us for this discussion is financial analyst Kalu Aja. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
How are you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So unfortunately, I don't know that we have enough information to see the discrepancies that are being referred to. But he spoke with so much conviction, and while we wait for more information, what will be the implication of this? If a gazetted law then differs from what the National Assembly passed, what will be the implications of this?
Loss of confidence, really. Like, we're not sure what's in the act. The president had signed it, and now we're hearing it was amended. There are a few snippets online to what was changed, and there are major changes, if they are true, to do with like arrests and coming before the National Assembly. What they passed had, like, they could arrest you if you didn't come before National Assembly and all that, and powers that were given and they were taken off the signed order. So they're not minor allegations. They are very, very major that affect the entire running and operations of the bill. But what it does do is remove confidence. This bill has already had a lot of controversy, including the deal with France and all that. So this just adds another layer of complexity and questions that we don't need. Tax laws are supposed to be smooth, you know, people are supposed to accept it, and of course be compliant. But now people are going to be like, that's one reason why they wouldn't do it and all that. So not very, very good in my view.
Now, also following up on what you just mentioned, I mean, this is, when you talk about taxes, you're talking about people's hard-earned monies. And if there's a trust issue somewhere, people compliance will be very low. Would you advise the government just to go ahead with the implementation on the 1st of January, which is a few weeks from now, or they should come out in the open and address these issues, the merit of these issues?
Yeah, I declare they have to come out and say whether it's true or false, and then go back and essentially redo the whole process, sign every page. If you look at the budget pages, right, every page is signed for a reason. So you've got to reinstall trust in the process and trust in the document itself. You don't want to give people excuses. You could be sued. And somebody will say, well, what was passed isn't what you are taking to court to pay taxes on. And you're going to find yourself in court. Then it gets messy. So they should have jumped all over this yesterday and said, it's true, it's not true, or this is what we're going to do, and all that. Silence, looks like consent that maybe there's something going on there. They should be more quicker to answer this. It was made on the floor. So it's more or less like an official allegation, right? So they need to take it very, very seriously. It's trust, like you said. Money is trust. If we don't trust, you're not going to pay taxes. Yeah.
All right. We're aware that today is the 19th day in the month of December 2025, a day that's quite significant, especially for the presidency, because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will be presenting the appropriation bill of over 54 trillion naira to the National Assembly later today. I mean, hopefully Nigerians are waiting for a few things that they do not sing on your mandate and what will be inside of the budget. So they've highlighted three things they're looking forward to. They do not sing what's going to be on that budget. And lastly, if there will be an eventual presentation of what the previous fiscal appropriation bill had done, especially for the country in terms of what it was used for. So my question to you would be, as we wait for that presentation later today, can we rightly say that the previous ones, last year, we did see some things that were inside of the budget. Nigerians had raised concerns, and why is this always repeating itself, which I'm also aware that you are aware of, are some things that would always show up, especially things that need to be purchased, and they keep coming up every now and then. What would you say concerning that, and how do you think this would impact heavily going forward into 2026, not having seen what 2025 appropriation bill had done in terms of making it open to Nigerians?
So let me try to be very, very polite, right? This process has been really broken. The budget process, very, very broken. As of today, we have zero report of 2025 income, spending, debt, or deficits from the federal government. These are quarterly reports, so we should have 4 or at least 3 by now. We have none. The last report that you see online on the budget office was dated 4th quarter 2024. So all the revenues, all the spending that was done from 2024 till today, we have no record. Then we're going to have a brand new budget that we've heard. The capital element is going to be from 2024 and 2025. It's going to be taken in 2026. We have no record. There's no way to track what has happened or what's going to happen. So it's a big fail on this government that came out and was going to change things and run by an accountant, quote unquote, that was going to basically do things better. So that's on one side. If you then look at the content of previous budget, like you've alluded, certain things come up: honorariums, buying of cars, tires, trainings. Although it's like they take the same budget, just apply a 5% or 7% increase and just represent it over and over and over. Nigerians don't feel the impact, right? But this particular process, if you look at the past years and this year, what we see is a pattern where we announce budgets on paper, especially the capital component, but we don't fund it. Then we borrow far in excess of what has been announced, and that doesn't go to the capital component. So that's what we're seeing right now. So even the announcement itself don't really hold water, because if you look at the implementation, they don't match up. We want to spend 13 trillion. We only release funds for about 6 trillion. Then we borrow like 12 trillion, but we don't take the capital project. So it's really a mess. To track the budget itself doesn't give you much confidence. I'm surprised folks still lend money to Nigeria based on our budget. It is a lot of work. We talked about zero-based budgeting in the past, and I'm surprised we're not talking about it now. That's what we need to go back to. Clean slate, start afresh with new ideas and new milestones.
Okay, so let's talk responsibilities. Since you're speaking about the budget and the fact that we can't track this implementation, so on who does the responsibility lie? Who should we hold accountable? Also, referring to what you said earlier regarding tax and how the government should have come out at this point to clarify. I'm looking at Taiwo Yedele's X account. The last time he had posted there was 3 days ago. There hasn't been any official publication to dispute that. So on whose shoulder do you think the responsibility lies to give clarity regarding the alleged discrepancies in the tax bills and now with regards to the budget implementation?
The last person that had the budget was the federal government. So the House passes a bill, sends to the president assents, it then goes for gazetting. What he's alleging is that between the president signing and it being gazetted is where they were in session. So it's even weightier than that. The president has already signed, then at the gazetting stage, it was then changed. So whoever held it last, that's the chain of control. That person, was the person that we should hold responsible on that. Same thing with the budget. Whoever has the money is responsible for the implementation and all that. So Mr. Taiwo is more or less, quote unquote, like a line advisor to the president. He should have come out. He's very, very eloquent. Usually, he should have come out and said, "Oh, this is what's going on." Even the current bill, the current tax bill, right, already has some issues with 50 million and 100 million of the definition of a business. We already have that issue already before this allegation. There's 50, there's 100. Mr. Taiwo has confirmed there's going to be 100 million. How we define a small business, but there are two numbers in the act itself. So this is just an added layer of lack of trust, that it wasn't well done and all that. They've done a great job in the reform itself, but these sort of things sort of bring up speed bumps, and it's not good for trust and competence going forward.
Now, Mr. Aja, we've seen, and it didn't start with this administration. We see budgets that are passed, or that it almost feels like a copy and paste of last year's line items. And we've been doing this almost like a culture, is that the budget is not backed by any sort of scientific research or studies. It's just an exercise in almost like a copy and paste. Then we keep going on and on and on, the same year doing the same thing. So what are the implications of this for growth and development in a country? And is the National Assembly truly doing its oversight functions? Because they seem to just let everything pass without deep scrutiny. If they were doing their jobs, we wouldn't have this repeat itself year on year.
So, I mean, it's just, I don't know where to start from. Look, just understand what's going on. Nigeria, let's look at Nigeria as we're third or fourth largest economy in the whole of Africa. We seem to be number one in the whole of Africa. When we pass a budget, folks take that budget and say, oh, how much is on capital, how much is on recurrent, and they score the government just based on how much they allocate to capital spending. So last year we had the record announcement on capital spending. But if you look at if you go into the budget implementation, not the budget that was just passed on TV, you then see that when they allocate cash, they don't follow what's on the actual budget. And that's why you don't see the development in Nigeria. Because they announce there's going to be a road, then they start the road, but there's no funding for the road, or there's no funding for the hospital. So you look at the budget and say, well, they're going to build a hospital, you don't see it. There's going to be a road, they don't see it. Then you say there's corruption. Maybe somebody has, quote unquote, chopped the money. There's just no cash. Then they borrow. So where's the borrowing going to? Again, this administration removed fuel subsidy. And the idea was that when we remove fuel subsidy, we're going to get a lot of money. We don't need to borrow. We can do more capital projects. But right now, we're hearing there is no revenue to carry out the project. So what was the National Assembly doing for 12 months? That they couldn't call the guys in and say, quarter one, quarter two, where's your implementation? Why now are we hearing there's no money at the fourth quarter of 2025? We're talking of 2024 capital projects being moved to 2026. Someone dropped the ball, and then we're paying the price for that incompetence, really.
So, I mean, you've just talked about it. Someone really has dropped the ball. There is a provision here, Section 50, Nigeria's Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 requires the publication of quarterly budget implementation reports. It's December. We don't have the last quarter's budget implementation report. The Minister of Finance had commented about this, stating that, there are a number of bottlenecks that have ensured or that have prevented them from being able to achieve a number of the things that they had set out to achieve. 40 trillion was the target. They've only made 10 trillion. There's a 30 trillion shortfall that is now rolled over to 2026. Add the rollover from 2024 into 2025. What do we need to do to keep...
also add the fact that Mr. President said the budget, the revenue target had been met.
Yes, in August, he said the revenue target had been met, yet we're hearing a different explanation from the Minister of Finance. So where would we say we lost the plot? And what needs to change for us to be able to ensure that we don't keep having rollovers? We're having budget of restoration, budget of this and budget of that with all the fancy names, but it doesn't seem like it's achieving what it was set out to achieve.
Where they lost the plot was the assumptions they made was too positive. We were going to sell 2 million barrels at $75 a barrel. That was the first mistake. Those are very, very ambitious. When we put that in the budget, it gave us a false sense of income. With that false sense of income, we then went to the banks, to the Euro bonds, and we borrowed money, federal government bonds and all that. So we have a lot of borrowing, but the revenues have not come in. Output now for oil is about 1.4, 1.5. Price of crude oil is about 60, 65. That's a big hole. But we've already borrowed. Now we have to cover that hole. And that's why we're in the mess we're in now. There's no revenue, but we have tons of projects. So the mistake they are doing, they are carrying over budget. You don't carry over a budget, you carry over a project. You can have a project for 10 years and it's funded annually in your budget. But they are carrying over the entire capital budget, 70% of the capital budget to next year. That's never done anywhere. And that's because they want to protect the folks, quote unquote, that have the constitutional projects in that budget. That's the mistake we're making. You can't build an airport in 1 or 2 years. So every year you appropriate funds. But I've never heard a budget is carried over into next year. Every year you look at your project, you fund or you drop. If we have less revenues, we should then have an austerity budget that says we cannot fund everything. We need to drop some. We're trying to cut our coats to fit our size and not the cloth that we have. So we're spending too much, we're borrowing too much, we're making record revenues, but the spending is out of proportion. I can give you numbers. Mr. Tinubu is spending 34 trillion. He's borrowing $1 trillion a month, plus the removal of subsidy. And still we have a deficit of about 12 trillion that he has to fund. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
All right. I also want to ask, I mean, spending that much and still borrowing, that's a different kettle of fish that Nigerians would have to deal with. But what happened to the customs, for instance? The customs had come out to say that they had made about 2.64 trillion in terms of revenue, which they say it's a high record of about 19%. And then you had the National Assembly telling the customs that they are targeting to hit about 6-point-something trillion. But bottom line, the customs is bringing in revenue. You have other state arms of government that's also bringing in revenue. And then, like you rightly mentioned, a question I also wanted to ask, the revenue that's coming from the subsidy, all of these revenues, if we piece them together, aren't they supposed to do something for the country to enable the government to stop borrowing? Or is it as a result of just marking the reports to say, yes, we brought in something, whereas maybe really there was nothing?
I think they're getting the revenues. Like I said, they're making record revenues. When President Buhari left office, revenues were about 7 trillion. In 2024, President Tinubu is in about 20 trillion. 20 trillion from 7 trillion. When President Buhari left office, his spending was 6 trillion. Tinubu is spending 38 trillion. They are making a lot of revenues, but the one key issue that they're spending money on that they don't tell you is debt servicing. We have huge debt. That all the monies from the customs, from the fuel subsidy, bulk of it is going towards debt servicing, not debt pay down, debt servicing. Then the rest goes where? To pay salaries. So they really have nothing to do capital project with. They've got to pay salaries every month, and they've got to pay the debt every month. But capital projects can wait a bit. So that's why you hear the announcements, trillions raised by customs, trillions raised from, but you don't see projects. There's just no capital backing. Again, remember, we're only talking of 2024. In 2024, we had about a 13 trillion budget for capital expenses. The cash release was 6 trillion out of 13. But we borrowed 12 trillion. But we only gave capital 6 trillion. So where's the other funds? If we were borrowing for capital projects, then we would have funded the entire budget with just the borrowing to build the roads and all that. But now there are no roads. There are no funds to build those roads, but we've increased the borrowing. So clearly the borrowings are going towards paying salaries and debt servicing, which I suspect is why we don't have the implementations. I think if they bring it out, Nigerians will be a bit surprised to see the number that will be under debt servicing and not under capital expenses.
Now, Mr. Aja, I mean, just from what we've discussed today, one thing we can agree on is if we continue on this path, we're walking towards an abyss, and this is not sustainable. So at what point will the federal government admit and start taking steps to redress this balance? Because, I mean, let's look at a family, for example. If you're living above your means and you're borrowing more than you earn, people will look at you and say you're not responsible head of the family, and that's what we're seeing in the way the government is running the economy right now. What steps should the government take to correct this? Do they need to slow down on these legacy projects of 700 kilometer superhighway and remodeling the airport and other legacy projects they seem to have prioritized?
Well, it's two things. Number one is an austerity program, which means we're going to cut down on spending, just in summary. Number two is to do a zero-based budgeting. No template, just start in 2026 and say what is essential. If we don't have the money, we clearly have to do health and education and national security. Every other thing has got to justify why it should be in the budget. Do we need to travel abroad for training? Do we need to go for COP26 or 27? We don't need all that anymore. So we're in a revenue crisis. That's where we are right now. If you read the papers, Nigeria is struggling to sell cargoes of crude oil. Even if we sell the cargoes of crude oil, we're selling at 60. The budget price is 75. This carryover what you're hearing is being predicated on selling 2 million barrels a day at 75. Clearly, that's not going to happen. The supplementary budgets are just more spending, not backed up by revenues. So we've got to pull back and say, like you said, when a family, dad has lost his job, we just have mom working. So income has fallen by 60%. So we're going to cut down on cable. We're not going to go to Greece for holiday. We've got to cut down, cut our clothes according to the cloth. But what Nigeria is doing is saying, those projects, we are still going to do them. We'll simply take them to next year, and then we're going to pray that revenues come in. So we can, just so we have a carryover of projects, we've got to admit to ourselves, the money is not there to do these projects. Cut them down and ask ourselves real questions. We have an east-west road. Can we just go and fix that and leave the coastal road for now? Can we fix the other inner roads that bring food to the cities? What is essential? National security, of course, is very essential. Do we focus on that so we can bring down inflation when we get more food supply? We can't do everything. Every project is good. A road from Sokoto State to Badagry is very, very good. But if you can't fund it, why are you starting it when you have roads that are still not motorable? So again, scale of preferences in economic terms, you've got to go back. Very simple issues: austerity, zero-based budget, scale of preference, and then you solve your problem right there.
This austerity, it's a bit scary to think about.
I don't like the word.
I really don't like it. But as a Nigerian citizen who is also directly affected by whatever policies or inefficiencies the government may exhibit at any point, if we have all these rollovers going into 2026, what is the implication for individuals, for businesses, bearing in mind that there will be an implication of the new tax law from the 1st of January?
So it's keep it very, very simple. It means there's going to be more spending, but we don't have the money, so there's going to be more borrowing. When the government goes to borrow, it drives the private sector out of the market because it can borrow the best. So the cost of capital goes up. So if you're an SME, it's harder for you to get a loan. If they borrow more, it stresses the Naira in relation to they have to go back and somehow fund the Naira. So Naira gets stressed, your exchange rate weakens and all that. So the government's capacity to take intervention measures in the economy is also weakened. It's got no revenues. And then that's why you see the cracks. You see ASU will come out and say, we don't need more money. They go on strike because there's just simply no money. If you announce revenues in trillions, but you are still borrowing, and you've removed this fuel subsidy, the fuel subsidy was the big piggy bank that we're looking at to say, well, subsidy goes, the federation, not just federal government, the federation, states, locals, and federal government gets a lot of money. It has happened. Monies have doubled, but the spending has also doubled. The debt has also gone up. So it's like we've earned nothing from paying this high price on fuel. Think about it. You're paying high prices on PMS because the government told you they will take that money and build you a road. There is no road. You are paying the high prices. So it's a big problem. We are already under austerity. Private families are already under austerity. It's only the federal government that is spending as if it's in an oil boom, buying new jets, and not looking at cutting down spending to match what the people it's governing are already doing.
And I don't think that we can wrap this up now that we're talking about oil without referring, at least touching briefly on the drama between Dangote and the NMDPRA and invariably the NUPRC, I think Nigerian Union of Petroleum Regulation, NUPRC. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get your thoughts on what has happened. There has been a corruption allegation. There's been some resignation. Whether they are directly related, we do not know. We cannot say. But there have also been some allegations against Dangote about him trying to monopolize the market and him trying to prevent importation. So let's get your thoughts on that and what the implication will mean for the larger for the country at large, especially because this is an area we struggled with over the course of the years.
Yeah, look at it this way, right? If you go around the world, you can count on one finger $20 billion projects. From America to China to anywhere in the world, you can count on one hand 20 billion projects. We have one in Nigeria. Whatever we say about Dangote, he's brought a 20 billion project to Nigeria. You could have gone to Benin or Togo or Ghana, put that refinery there. Nigeria will go and buy and pay him dollars. He came to Nigeria. So whatever his intentions, he's now a strategic investor, and they will call him a too big to fail investor. If you take away Dangote refinery from Nigeria's economic picture, your naira goes to like 10,000 to $1. Dangote refinery plus petrochemical. We're now exporting aviation fuel, fertilizers to the Americas, and in forex. The point I'm making, he's a strategic investor that cannot fail. But he's not being treated in Nigeria as such. Whatever the issue, Pengerson cannot shut down Dangote refinery. Whatever the issue, whatever. It can't happen in another country where you shut down, can you shut down a nuclear power plant in France? It's unthinkable. You can go on strike, but those power plants will still be on. So we have to be able to separate the operations of Nigeria and then personal issues. And this all started from the regulator saying Dangote petrol products were like below standard. That's where all this started from. Then Dangote and them have been fighting this shadow proxy war. They're reducing prices. Why is Nigeria still importing PMS? With which dollars? We're talking about we don't have which dollars are we using to import PMS? Why should 1 liter of PMS come into this country when we have the largest refinery in sub-Saharan Africa? It doesn't make any sense. That's what the coordinating minister is supposed to do, to say, even though we want to encourage imports, we now have to concentrate around a refinery, give that refinery local crude, so we get the benefits of scale and the local value add of the refinery. If Dangote was a quote-unquote foreigner, would have been treated this way? I doubt it. So, it's sad what's happening. Other billionaires are now watching and saying, well, if this can happen to Dangote, I'll leave my money in Monaco. I'm not going to bring it to Nigeria and then get rubbish like this. That's just the way it feels. He's not been treated well, irrespective of whatever intention. If he's a monopolist, where were the rest? Other folks have licenses. Why didn't they also build the refinery? So I don't think Nigeria is suffering. That's the point I'll put it. And yeah.
Okay. My final question will come from the tax reform. Permit me to go this route. I know you've been following this very seriously. And the worry for most Nigerians, including myself, and I'm sure it's the same for my colleagues, is why do you think the FIRS, which will be known as the NIRS from January, why the partnership, the MOU with France? Doesn't Nigeria have enough companies to have handled the new tax reforms? Yeah. You have the KPMGs, you have Deloitte, you have Ernst & Young, you have Pricewaterhouse, all of that. How come it's France? And why is this MOU held so much in secrecy?
Yeah, that's a problem. Like on the surface, it sounds okay. We're going to go to France to get technical assistance on taxes. Fine. But why is it a secret? If it's technical assistance, put it out there. Because when you allow rumors to swirl around, it grows legs and then it becomes substantive. You've got to get ahead of this. If folks are asking for what you sign and you say it's just a technical cooperation, put it out there. Kill the story. But because they've refused to put it out there, this story has now grown legs and has now embedded itself that it's something secret they are doing in France. They don't want the taxpayers to see. And that's unfortunate. Nothing regarding taxes should be secret. Where it's our money. You are asking us to be transparent, but you are not being transparent. Like you said, it's with France, it's not with the EU. There are many other bodies in Europe that basically cooperate with governments on taxes. Why didn't we go there? Why did we go to a government in France to say, come and help us? And for the Nigerians that are maybe supporting this, the French elections are going to come up very, very soon. This government in France may leave office, or they might have a divided Congress. It will be unfortunate if this is now coming, if this will now find out from the French what we signed. The same thing we're doing in Burkina Faso now, where we talk and then in the end we go back there. If there's an agreement, release it and show there's nothing amiss here. We sign a technical agreement, trust us. But when you keep things secret, you tell people that, listen, I don't want you to see this. So why shouldn't we see it? Because you have interest in that agreement that you like to protect. That's what people will say, and you can't blame them for that. Again, trust issues. If you want to take my money, you've got to be very, very transparent. The government of Nigeria is not being transparent about taxes. All
right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalu Aja, for joining us and sharing about this. I guess in the next few hours, we probably will hear from the government, or days. We should expect to get a response, and we'll know what the next steps are. Thank you for your time with us.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thanks so much,
Thank
guys.
you. All right. Still speaking about the tax reforms, what to expect in the new year regarding the tax laws, and maybe what the implication of the alleged discrepancies are. We're now being joined for the second part of this conversation by partner Tax Regulatory and People Services Division at KPMG Nigeria, Marians Aroge. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's Martins.
Martins, so sorry about that. Thank you, Martins Aroge, for joining us this morning. Before we get into the conversation, let's take a look at the video that had sparked this online conversation about the discrepancies, the alleged discrepancies between the approved tax law and what was put before the House. Let's take a look.
A breach of privilege has been committed, or referring the matter to the Committee of Ethics and Privileges. Still, if the matter is raised in the Committee of the Whole, the chairman shall leave the chair on the order to report progress. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I'm here today because my privilege has been breached as a member of this all-important House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, we passed the tax laws on this floor. And Mr. Speaker, I took my time in the last 3 days to look at the gazetted pass copy, the vote and proceedings of the House of Representatives, and also went an extra mile to look at the vote and proceedings of the Senate of what was harmonized. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, what I passed on this floor is not what is gazetted. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I have all the copies, but I'm coming under privilege because I was here, I gave my vote, and it was counted, and I'm seeing something completely different. So on that note, on this privilege, I will call on Mr. Speaker to graciously look at what was harmonized, what is in the gazetted copy, what was passed in the House and the Senate. You will find out what is before Nigerians, which is being sold to Nigerians at the Ministry of Information, which I personally went to buy the gazetted copies, are not what was passed. So there is no motion here, but Mr. Speaker, I'll be pleading that all the documents should be brought before the Committee of the Whole. The whole members should see what is in the gazetted, should see what they passed on the floor, so that we can make the relevant amendments. Mr. Speaker, this is a breach of the Constitution, this is a breach of our laws, and this should not be taken by this honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Abdulsammad. Your observation is noted.
All right, welcome back. Martins, I'm sure you've seen this video before now, but it was important for us to play it again to give context to the conversation. We're not quite sure what the details are, but I'd like you to talk to us about the implications. If we confirm officially that there are key discrepancies between what was passed, judging by what the lawmaker said.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first concern for me is around timing, because these gazette copies have been out for a bit, and they are scheduled to come into effect, at least the bulk of the new laws that would impact companies operating in Nigeria are scheduled to come into effect in 11 days. Lawmaking is a very complex and complicated process. As much as we think it is simple, it isn't that very simple. We have two houses of parliament, more or less, in Nigeria, the upper and the lower house. They both look at these laws. If you recall, this was an executive bill as at the time, so it was prepared by the executive and submitted to the National Assembly. You have the Senate looking at it independently. You have the House looking at it independently, and then after they are both done, you probably would have about 3 versions: the executive version, the Senate version, and then the House version. And then you then have to harmonize all of those 3 versions to come up with one bill, which would then be presented to the president for assent. After that, there's a long process that goes with the draftsmen looking at it, trying to ensure that they dot all of the I's and cross all of the T's. And from experience, we've always seen that because of all of the long procedural steps that you need to undertake to pass any law, you typically may find some discrepancies between versions. Most of the times, a lot of time is not deliberate. It's just that, as they say, too many cooks and the broth. So we do see these sort of issues from time to time. Now, I don't know, because all of us we're not part of all of that process. What we see at the end of the day is what is published in the Gazette. So I don't know what the level of discrepancy, if any, exists between what was finally passed by the House and the final version. And like I said, what was passed by the House may be different from what was passed by the Senate. All of this has to be harmonized. So it's at some point we hope that we have some clarity. But if I speak from an investor perspective, most investors, all they are interested in is which version was passed by which House. All they're interested in is having clarity so that they can plan. And that, which is why I talked about the timing, because these laws come into effect for the most part on the 1st of January 2026.
Okay, Mr. Martins, yeah. Sorry to cut in. We'd like you to just hold your thoughts. We do have a break to go for. When we come back, we'd like to hear some more and possibly also look at something similar to the last question we asked our first guest, why the MOU hasn't been made public yet or hasn't been made available to some who have requested for it. But please do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're taking a look at the implication concerning the in quotes, discrepancies that have been allegedly found in the recent tax reforms that seems or is prepared to be passed and starts on January the 1st, 2026. Well, our guest here is one who has a very key experience in this, especially when it comes to taxation, and we're going to look at some of the implications as well. But let me also quickly mention that if you check online, you'd find that Nigerians are asking so many questions such as, why isn't the tax reforms laws made available to Nigerians to read? Why are economists not talking about it now, especially since the information or the video we saw of the alleged discrepancies that were found inside of the tax reforms laws document? So I'm going to go straight to you very quickly. And my question would be, now that we know that the government is set and ready to ensure that this law takes effect on the 1st of January, what should Nigerians expect, especially for those who seem to be far back and are not ready at all to roll with the new tax laws? What should we expect?
Okay, I think it depends on which side of the spectrum you are on. For a number of companies, I think that there's some positivity coming out of it. For a very long time, we've talked about our value-added tax system, or what we used to call a value-added tax system in Nigeria, which was in all effect a modified sales tax, because under a normal VAT system, you should be able to recover all of your input VAT. That's one very big, significant change that we would be seeing with this new act. It's a very positive change, and I think a number of companies are excited about that. I know that a lot of talk has been around bank accounts and government having access to bank accounts and all of that. But I think a lot of those talk isn't particularly very correct, because one, government has always had access to requests for information, including bank information. So it's not something that is particularly new or something that has been introduced by the new tax reform. Like I said to a group of people, it is not in anyone's interest to begin to do an individual audit or review of everyone's bank account. It will take the entirety of all of the tax officers' time, and the yield would not be commensurate with the effort. So Nigerians should be very relaxed about. I don't think that's an issue for consideration. If you look at the personal income tax, the exempt band has been increased. Now, your first 800,000 naira of income is exempt from personal income tax, which I think is the positive. Now, there are concerns around what the tax impact overall would be, especially for middle income earners, and whether they would see a drop or a slight increase in their tax payable. But for low income earners, it's a positive in terms of what to expect from the implementation of the new tax laws. So I think that there are positives. Now, there are other concerns around the incentive framework and whether they are appropriate, because we need to understand one thing. Nigeria is a developing country. We do have a very strong need to continue to attract investors and investments into the country, and it's a competitive landscape, a competitive global landscape that we operate in. Every country is looking to attract investors, and the amount of investment capital that is available is not infinite, is limited. So we need to also continue to look at that investment framework and whether it is sufficient to continue to ensure that Nigeria remains competitive in terms of being able to attract FDIs.
Okay, so because unfortunately, I mean, we've heard your explanation, but unfortunately, we are a nation that thrives on a lot of last-minute things. When they give a deadline and they say on the 20th, you have to do this, you see that by 19th, everybody's rushing to regularize their document. I want you to break this down for middle-income earners, for business owners. What next steps do they need to take for those who maybe have had their business, they've run their business with their personal account? What steps do individuals and businesses need to take? And what things should they be wary of? Should we go ahead, I mean, as we planned to continue with implementation or begin the implementation on the 1st of January? Okay,
again, most of the things I will say are not because we are coming into a new vista of tax reforms. Most of these things are things you should typically be doing even right now under the current tax dispensation. If you run a business, the importance of record keeping can never be overemphasized. I think Nigerians tend to conflate the individual and the business, where we think that it's one and the same person. But it's not. Your business is a separate entity from you as an individual. So you need to ensure that you have appropriate records for your inflows and your outflows. And again, like I said, it cannot be overemphasized. One of the changes that we've introduced right now is also tie your payment of indirect tax to your ability to also claim a tax deduction for expenses. So if you were transacting any business and that transaction was liable to VAT, for example, or you were importing goods and you were supposed to pay duties and you try to avoid all of that by cutting corners, you would also not be able to take a tax deduction for those expenses. So I think the most important thing for individuals and businesses is to ensure that they have a system where they can track and keep adequate records, because it's going to be more important than ever, ensuring that you have the records to substantiate what you've earned and what you've spent during the course of the year.
Now, Mr. Aroge, still back to the controversies surrounding the discrepancies in the gazetted law, which they claim is different from what was passed by the National Assembly by Honorable Abdulsammad Dasuki. You did touch on this earlier. You said that there are concerns for foreign investors, and you're also worried about the timing. Looking at the fact that we will be in January in a few weeks, is there still time to install confidence in the Nigerian people and trust, and also communicate effectively and address this very pertinent issue?
In fact, I think you already answered the question. It's about communication and effective communication. Like I was saying earlier, investors, one thing that is very key to investors is certainty. I might not like the tax regime, and I might not like the tax framework, but if I know what it is, I can plan around about it. I can model my business in a way and manner where I can manage what the tax risk and tax exposures maybe from doing that business in a country. And then I can then see if I can overall make an appreciable margin for my investors from doing that business. So when you hear things like this, that's where there is some concern around. So if I've been planning around what has been issued, will it change between now and January 1st? What will change in it? What was in the original version that is not in this version? So that lack of certainty is a thing of concern. And the only way you can manage that, you already mentioned it, is effective communication. If there are issues, and like I said, it's almost impossible. I think at most places in the world, when you have this sort of large-scale change, you may see these sort of issues because of the number of people involved in the process from start to end. So you may see some issues where there are slight changes, discrepancies, not deliberate, but just because, again, it's so many people involved in all of that process. So it's important that we understand what's the extent of this discrepancy, if any, and what will change so that businesses can have enough time to plan and react to these issues, because certainty is certainly very key for all manner of investors.
All right, just to wrap things up, final question. The president will be at the National Assembly today. He's expected to touch down live, and the presentation of the 2026 appropriation bill will also be made known to the National Assembly and by extension Nigerians, including yourself and us. What do you make of the fact that we're about to see another presentation for 2026, whereas 2025 has not been met with a complete expectation that was initially highlighted to be? Take, for instance, we're also expected to see a lot of things in the budget that was not implemented in 2025. What's your take on that? Do you think it's well enough to help investors or instill investor confidence? And what will it do for the economy going forward?
Okay, I think my first response to that is the fact that I had a plan in the past that I wasn't able to effectively implement is not a basis not to plan for the future. So we do have to plan, and the budget is actually a description of the country's plan for the year. So I appreciate the fact that we've struggled with budget implementation and the budget planning cycle, but it is no basis, it's not a reason for us to then hands up and say no more planning. So we do have to go through this process. I think we need to be a lot more disciplined when it comes to budget implementation, and maybe a lot more realistic, because when you hear things about, we were only able to generate less than 30% of projected revenues, it calls into question the entire budget planning process. So we probably need to look at how we go about the entire process from end to end, because the people rely on this budget. People rely on, because again, like I said, it's a snapshot of the country's plan for a year. So if I were doing business either with or in the country, I would look at the budget and I would expect that it would give me an idea of what to expect from the country over the next 12 months. The minute I can no longer rely on that plan, then it calls into question whatever we are doing and how we are doing it. So it's very important that we look at the entire process of preparing the budget, its implementation, and ensure that we get it right this time. Because yes, like you said, there are a number of people who rely on the budget, and it's important that we don't get to a point where people look at it and say it's just a reading phase, nothing's going to happen. We can't rely on this. We don't want to be in that position at all.
Thank you so much for your submission and your time with us here today. We don't want to get to a stage where our budget becomes a budget of God, man proposes, God disposes. We need to really put in the work. Thank you so much
Martin.
for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.